So that's what makes So that's what makes the BUN so interesting. Ain't nothing like a runaway baked good.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Changeling Tales. So today's story that we'll be looking at is called The BUN. It's a Russian story, and I believe the Russian title is Kolobok. I probably said that completely wrong. Apologies. So this story is particularly fascinating, not so much for the content that it holds within itself, but more so for the content it shares across many stories all over Europe. This story is a perfect example of how stories evolve over time and space. Just as people move around from one part of the world to another over the centuries and change, so do stories. So when I first read The BUN, I thought, man, this sounds exactly like the Gingerbread Man. Same story, same plot, just a different kind of baked good. And so I was thinking, well, maybe the English or Americans stole this story from the Russians. Maybe it was originally a Russian story. Somebody read it and was like, this would do really well in English. Let's just change it to a gingerbread man instead of a bun. So I went to research this theory, and it turns out I was completely wrong. And the truth is much more fascinating. So the story of the BUN was first recorded in 1864, but it's been told by people far longer before that. Same with the Gingerbread Man. It was first recorded in 1875, and the person who recorded it said that they had heard the story from a friend of their child friend, who heard it from their grandmother, and this reteller thought it was a very charming story and that they would include it in, I think it was a magazine. My point is, people have been retelling stories of runaway baked goods for centuries and have just loved it for one reason or another. It's really taken hold of people's imaginations anyway. So Russia, the US, England, those aren't the only places you can find stories about runaway baked goods. You can find them everywhere in Europe, all with slightly different variations. Because, as you can imagine, as people tell stories that they've heard from other people, details change, they forget bits, they add in bits, and so stories evolve as they move from one locality to another. So we can't really tell where exactly the story started because, the earliest written version is no indication of the earliest oral spoken version. But let's take a look at some of the differences and similarities in these runaway baked goods stories from all over Europe. So moving from east to west, start with Russia. So Russia has a bun, that is its baked good, and plot-wise, very similar to the Gingerbread Man. I don't want to say it outright because I'll be reading the story. Anyway, you'll see. You'll see what the story is like. And as you move further west towards other Slavic countries, there is pretty much the same story, but instead of a ball of dough or a bun, the baked good is actually a donut, or at least a Slavic-style donut. But otherwise, as far as I know, again, plotline, story is the same. If you move to Germany, then the story is different yet again, in that instead of a donut or a ball of dough, the runaway baked good is a pancake, and it's the same in France. However, the German and French versions are slightly different from the Slavic Russian versions because the baked good doesn't end up getting eaten unwillingly, I should say, by an animal. It's just spoiled the end, I'm sorry. If somehow you have never heard any variation of the story, sorry for spoiling it. I'm so rude. But the German and French versions are actually different from the Slavic and Russian versions of the runaway baked goods story, not just in that their main character is a runaway pancake, but that, in the end, the baked good is not unwillingly eaten by an animal. It willingly gives up its life to two starving, orphaned children. So a much nicer, moral ending. I was about to say feel good, but it depends on how you feel. In Norway, there is another very similar version of the story. Again, baked good is a pancake, but at the end, it's eaten by an animal, unwillingly, so back to that theme. Now, we run into some very interesting differences. One that I found particularly interesting was the Hungarian version of the story. So in the Hungarian version, the lead baked good is called a dumpling, but it actually apparently is more like a Hungarian head cheese. So whether it's a baked good or a cheese, I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, whatever it is, after it is made, it doesn't just run away and avoid getting eaten. It starts to eat everybody else. So first it eats the people who made it, then it goes out and terrorizes the town, and he starts eating everybody and everything, and it's not until a swineherd gets eaten with his big knife or sickle or whatever the heck he uses, and he cuts open the cheese from the inside, and everybody goes out and goes home, that the cheese stops. And I guess everybody was just like, okay, that was weird, and they just went home and carried on as usual. Now, the Russians also have another story called The Clay Man, which is quite similar to that Hungarian cheese story. A lonely couple bake themselves a child out of clay, and then the clay child eats them and then starts running around town and eating everybody else. So that seems to be a theme. Runaway baked goods that eat people. Europeans love that stuff, I guess. Makes for a great story. Anyway, going back to our runaway baked good theme, the British also had a variation written by Joseph Jacobs about a cake named Johnny Cake. And that plot line is pretty much the same, of multiple encounters with animals and is finally devoured. And there's also a Scottish version called The Wee Bannock, where the Bannock becomes a hero. I'm not sure exactly. I haven't read that version, so I'm not sure what that hero's journey is or how it ends, but point is, it's another variation. And then in the US, of course, there's the Gingerbread Man, which follows the same line of baked good, runs away, manages to escape multiple animals, and eventually things don't go so well. So that's what makes the BUN so interesting, is the fact that there is such a broad history of stories that it's connected to, and who knows, where exactly it came from, but now it's been everywhere. The baked good really did run all over Europe and North America. If there are any other variations that you know of, go ahead and comment about them down below. I'd love to know if the story spread even further. This kind of thing is so cool. Anyway, now I've chattered on to my heart's content. Let's get on to the story. The BUN. Once upon a time there was an old man, and one day he wanted something nice to eat. So he said to his wife, "My dear, please make me a bun." But she answered, "What am I to make it of? We have no flour." "What nonsense," he said. "Of course we have. You've only got to scrape the sides of the bin and sweep its floor, and you'll get plenty." So his wife took a feather brush, and she scraped the sides and swept the floor of the bin, and so got a little flour together. Then she kneaded the dough with cream, rolled out the bun, spread it over with butter, and then put it in the oven. And the bun turned out simply splendid. She took it out of the oven and put it on the windowsill to get cold. And there the bun lay, and he began to feel lonely, so he just took and rolled off. From the windowsill he rolled down onto the bench, from the bench onto the floor, and over the floor to the door. Then he rolled right over the threshold into the lobby, out of the lobby onto the front door steps, and down the steps right out of doors, and rolled straight along the road into the field. Suddenly he met a hare, and the hare said to him, Mr. Bun, I shall eat you up." "No, you shan't, Mr. Hare, for I'll sing you a song." And he started singing, I'm Mr. Bun, I was scraped from the sides and swept from the floor of the bin. I was kneaded with cream and fried in butter and was put to cool on the windowsill. But I got away from Gaffer and I got away from Granny, and I shan't find it hard to get away from you." And when he had finished his song, he went on rolling farther and was out of sight before Mr. Hare had time to look. And he went on rolling, when suddenly he met a wolf, and the wolf said to him, Mr. Bun, I shall eat you up." "No, you shan't, Mr. Wolf, for I'll sing you a song." And he started singing, I'm Mr. Bun, I was scraped from the sides and swept from the floor of the bin. I was kneaded with cream and fried in butter and was put to cool on the windowsill. But I got away from Gaffer and I got away from Granny and I got away from Mr. Hare, and I think I'll find it easy enough to get away from you." And he went on rolling farther when suddenly he met a bear, and the bear said to him, Mr. Bun, I shall eat you up." "Indeed you shall not, you old crooked paws. You couldn't if you tried." And he started singing, For I'm Mr. Bun, I was scraped from the sides and swept from the floor of the bin. I was kneaded with cream and fried in butter and was put to cool on the windowsill. But I got away from the Gaffer and I got away from Granny. I got away from Mr. Hare and got away from Mr. Wolf. Goodbye, Bruin." And he went on rolling farther, when suddenly he met a fox, and the fox said to him, "How do you do, Mr. Bun? How pretty you are, and how well baked you are." And Mr. Bun was pleased at being praised, and he started singing, I'm Mr. Bun, I was scraped from the sides and swept from the floor of the bin. I was kneaded with cream and fried in butter and was put to cool on the windowsill. But I got away from Gaffer and I got away from Granny. I got away from Mr. Hare and got away from Mr. Wolf. I got away from Bruin, and I'll get away from you." "That's a fine song," said the fox. "Please sing it me again, but come and sit on my nose. I've got so deaf lately." So Mr. Bun jumped up on Mr. Fox's nose and sang his song again, and the fox said, "Thank you, Mr. Bun, but please sing it just once again, and come and sit on my tongue. Then I shall hear still better." And Mr. Fox put out his tongue, and Mr. Bun jumped onto it, and Mr. Fox just closed his mouth and ate Mr. Bun up.